video I'm making here today is to show how people can help us to finalize the Arlington National Cemetery World War II fallen list. So here's our challenge. We have a list that was provided by Arlington National Cemetery, but it's incomplete. It includes the records with death dates from 1941 through January of 1946, but it includes non-World War II names, and it also is missing some basic information that we want to have for our writers who are going to be writing these stories. So I put together this table, and it's going to show you the information that is missing and where you can find it. So here in the first column, these are all the fields that are in our database. The ones in green are the ones that are already provided by Arlington National Cemetery. This one here on full name, we don't need to use that one. The ones in yellow are also ones that we want to use for this project, but that information we don't have yet. So we want people to be able to look that information up. And if they find it, this column shows what they do. For instance, if they have a death location, they can add it if they find it. If they're World War II fallen, mark yes or mark no. Add some notes of interest that you may find. Mostly it's just adding stuff into this cell if you find that information. Now, where do you look to find this information? In each column where we're looking for more information, we will tell you the most likely place you'll find it first. So if you are looking for whether or not they served in World War II, the most likely place to look would be Find a Grave. And if you don't have any luck there, you can look on Billion Graves. And if you don't have luck there, you can look on Honor States. And if you don't have luck there, you can look on Google. So 95% of the time, you're only going to have to go to the first resource. But if that doesn't work, we have these other options for each of these section of things we're looking for. Okay, the next thing I show here in the notes are just some miscellaneous things that may be helpful when you're looking for that particular location. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to our next slide. The sources we're going to use to complete the Arlington records are Find a Grave, Billion Graves, Honor States, and Fold 3. And you'll want to use the tips for finding missing Arlington National Cemetery informations table. That's the one I showed you right here. So the information that you can find on Find a Grave are gravestone photos, maybe there. You can find the rank, branch, date of birth, date of death, the unit, the awards. All this may be available just by looking at the gravestone photo on Find a Grave. The gravestone photo will also say World War II on it, so that's how we know if they were in World War II. Apart from what you can find from the gravestone photo, you will be able to possibly find on the Find a Grave record their middle name. The name you may have from the Arlington record may just be a middle initial, and it's better to have a full middle name if possible, especially with more common names. It's nice to have that middle name so we can differentiate that person from someone else. You may also, from Find a Grave, be able to find hometown, county, state, other notes of interest, circumstances of death, maybe even a photo of who they are. So great resource. First off is let's look at Find a Grave first. This is also the first place to look for to make sure that this record isn't one that's an infant, a child, or a non-World War II vet that was buried at Arlington, because we want to exclude those from our project. So if Find a Grave doesn't work for all you're looking for, go to Billion Graves, which also has gravestone photos, and those could also help you find those same information that's right on the gravestone. Another place to look would be Honor States. This is especially useful if you're looking for the service number, which is a very important thing that our writers want to be able to have. Searching by service number on a few places will help them narrow down where they're looking for source information. Honor States can sometimes get you this information, rank, branch, date of birth, etc., if you haven't found that from either Billion Graves or Find a Grave. And they have a pretty good chance of having photos. If it's going to be one, you may find one on Honor States. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to find out is there already a story saved on fold 3. Our whole point of what our writers are going to do is we're going to write a story for everyone buried in Arlington. So the first thing we want to do before we assign the story to them is there already a story? Because if there is, we don't need to assign that. That's not going to happen very often because there's probably 7,700 World War II fallen that are buried there out of 400,000, and we've only done maybe less than 1/3 of 1% so far. So it's not likely that you'll come across one, but it may happen. So if that happens, then you can show that the story exists, or you can show that it doesn't exist, or you can mark that there's information there, but you can tell from looking at it that this isn't just a story. Maybe it's a clip from a news story, but it doesn't tell someone's obituary type story. Last of all is we can do a Google search. And I'm going to share an example later of Clyde Hewley Brown, who we couldn't find any other way. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a discussion on a special case regarding group graves. So that's what I'm going to cover. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give some examples of how you find this information. So I'm going to go over here to this tab here, and I'm calling this Watchtower East, Arlington National Cemetery. So this is a section that we're doing. This section happens to have a possibility of 109 minus the title row. So there's 108 records that might be World War II fallen in section E. And so we need to have our volunteers go through this and see if these people are really World War II fallen. So if you're helping on this, the section director will assign you some names from this. Originally, this is what it's going to look like. You've got this information that you do have, but most of it is pretty empty. There's not a lot there. So at this particular group, I've done some of these already, and so I'm showing these as the green is information that I was able to add by researching those various websites. The reddish color here means we're going to exclude those because they don't belong in the project. They're infants or they're not World War II veterans. And so I'm going to just start doing some examples here. The first one I will show you is Louis Bargham. That's the one, this row right there. And so you always start on searching on Find a Grave first. So I'm going to look for Louis Bargham, and we knew he died on January of 1945. So over here, Louis Barham, he died 1945. So I'll do a search. Doesn't show up. Did I type the name in correctly? Because that sometimes happens. Oh, I got the wrong name. It's Bargman. Louis Bargman. No wonder it didn't work. So always double check that you put in the information correctly so that it doesn't look for the wrong one. So here's Louis Bargman. You can see that he was born January 6, 1945, died January 6, 1945. This is a record from Arlington National Cemetery. It's the correct person we're looking for. If I click on that, it does give a little bit more information. Clearly not a World War II veteran. So on the record here, I just put no in this column here. This is where we're looking for if he served in World War II. So that would be an example of showing when somebody is an infant in World War II, not someone who served in World War II. Okay, let me show you another example. We're going to look up Frederick Bruner, this guy right here. Born in 1880, died in 1942. So again, we're going to always try to use Find a Grave first, because that'll be the most likely place that information will be. Okay, Frederick Bruner. Here he is in Arlington. So that's the one we're looking for. Okay, here's some photos of him. We want to look for a photo of his gravesite. So we're going to press this button that says see more. And here's his gravestone. So let's look up his gravestone here. So it says where he's from. It shows what unit he was in. It does not say World War II on the gravestone. So we're have some pretty good information here that if he was born in 1880, meaning he would have been in his 60s. Not sure they had too many 60-year-old privates serving World War II. So we're going to mark him down as not being somebody who served in World War II. So that one will be taken off the list. We won't assign that to one of our riders. Okay, let's try another one. We're going to try Paul Alston. Paul Alston. So we'll try him first on Find a Grave. Paul Alston, and he died in 1944. More common names, sometimes you want to put in the year born too because you want to have both information. Okay, Sergeant Paul Leroy Alston. We'll click that on to see more details about who he is. So this record here shows that he's in a common grave, but we do have some information that actually isn't on the gravestone here, but it is here in this section. We know his birthday, we know what county he's from, we know what state he's from. The information we know his rank right here. It's also on the gravestone. So this is listed in green right here to indicate that when I got this record, this was blank. So we were able to add the birth date. I was also able to find a death location through my research. I wrote down a note of interest that it's a group grave. I'm going to show a little bit later where you can find these service numbers. But the gravestone said he was in the Army. It said he was in the sergeant. I'll show a little bit later where I found out what infantry regiment he was from. He was killed in action, and that information was from a different location too. But from the headstone, we were able to identify he was from Philadelphia County, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There's no photo. I have a comment here that he was in a segregated regiment. So there weren't that many African Americans who served in combat regiments during the war, so it's kind of unique when something like that is found, so I put that in as a comment. Here is the link to his Find a Grave location. We ask you that you copy that into the spreadsheet so that if the writer wants to go back and look at that, it's just a click away. And then, does he have a full 3-story? I'll show you on a different example how we determine that. In this case, this person did not. Okay, so that's an example of how Find a Grave can give you lots of details right here. Okay, I'm going to look up another person. This person is Lloyd Brown. I'm going to find out what his middle name is because Lloyd Brown's kind of common. He's got a middle initial L. So if I would normally recommend that you don't put in the middle initial right away, because sometimes it's not in the search. So better to search broadly to start with. And if you end up having too many John Smiths, for example, then maybe you do add in a middle initial or a middle name. But for now, we're just going to try his first name and his last name. And he died in 1945. October 1945, so that's actually after the war ended, right? Talk about that in a minute. Okay, Lloyd Brown. Where is he? There's a number of Lloyd Browns, but look, there's one right here, and he happens to be Lloyd L. Brown, and he's in Arlington. So if we click on that, we have his Arlington record. We already knew his birth date and his death date, it sure would be nice if we had a photo, because there's information on the gravestone that we need to help fill out our records. So because that one's not available on Find a Grave, we're going to use Billion Graves. So you put in Lloyd, and then we're going to put Brown here, last name. Start our search. So lots of Lloyd Brown. So I'm going to add a year when he died, 1945. And we'll zero it in within 0 years because we know he was died exactly that year. Okay, here's Lloyd L. Brown, Arlington National Cemetery. Billion Graves also does searches of these in Arlington. So we have a photo of the gravestone. So this says in memory of, that tells me it's a cenotaph, so I was going to mark that down. We know he's a private, he was in the Army, he's in World War II. Check, check, check. We can add all those things. Over here it says BSM. That stands for Bronze Star Medal. And you can barely see it behind the grass, but you can kind of tell it says Purple Heart. So I would add all those things into his record that we've added here. Cenotaph. The one thing I notice here is date of death may be October 13, 1944. And the reason I know that is I found out that he was missing in action. And sometimes when someone was missing in action, they would add 1 year and 1 day to the date when he died. So he probably didn't die after the war ended, but he might have died in October of 44. Okay, so that's where we put this information. Here in this column, I should put that he had the Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and is able to find this information elsewhere where he's from, and I'll show you that next. Okay, so let's look on a place called Honor States to get some more information about Lloyd Brown. Honor States is a really nice website. The person that created this, he just wants to create databases for military, so they go back to World War I, includes our World War II era. So here's Lloyd L. Brown. Here's his death date. So this is the one, there's 2 of them, but he's going to be this one here. Now we can tell what state he's from. So I couldn't find out his state from Find a Grave, nor could I find it out from Billion Graves, but I did find it out on Honor States. And the other thing that I was able to find here was his serial number. So I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need that for something else. So we also know what unit he was in, and we know that he was missing in action. So a lot of good information. Also shows his awards here. Bronze Star and Purple Heart. So great resource site, Honor States. Okay, so one thing we want to be able to do here as we're getting towards the end is, do we even need to write a story about Lloyd L. Brown? Maybe there's already a story on Fold 3. So if I just take his serial number and put it in the search box and press search, it's going to pull up all the records that are related to that serial number. He's got this record here, which is an image. He's got some records here that are memorials. It's usually when you see this, just a memorial there, that probably means there's not going to be much there. This one here shows that he earned the Bronze Star, so they have at least that information. If I click on this, and then I go to the Story tab, there's nothing there. So Fold 3 has a memorial set up for him, but no story. So we would mark that one as a no. There's no story for Lloyd Brown. We definitely want to be able to have a writer complete this project here. Okay, we're almost to the end here. I want to talk about one of these on this list that was harder to find than the others. Let's see. Let me go to one more besides that. I'm going to go look up John Brannock, a Marine here. So let's go to Find a Grave. John Brannock died in 1942. Okay, this one here has a photo. So that's one of the reasons I want to show that is when we have a photo, we want to mark that on the schedule that we have a photo for that. And this one even has some information about his background that will be very useful for a writer to refer to that. So that's why we also want to have the link from the Find a Grave URL added into our records, so that's easy for our writers to click back and retrieve the information they need from here when they're doing their story. The other thing I wanted to show is, let's look on fold 3 and see if Brannock has a story already. He's got more extensive information. He's got a photo. Maybe he should have a story. So I'm going to start with his serial number here, because that's the easiest way to search on Find It on fold 3. So I'll go over here to a search button, put in the serial number. No results found. Oh, wait, maybe it's coming up here. Let me put in the last name too, see if that helps. Okay, John Harold Brannock. If I click on him and I go to stories, no stories added. I was looking at a previous version of this, and it did show some information related to him. It might be under a different name, rather than take more time with this recording. It was an incomplete record. I think it had a copy of some information about when his remains were found and identified. So that's good information to know, but it's not a complete story. So we would just indicate that in the case of John Brannock, the story is incomplete on fold 3. That's what we put there. Okay, one last thing I want to show is I mentioned here in my notes that sometimes we have a special case where we have group graves. So if there's group graves, it could be 4, 6, sometimes as many as 10. Hopefully not more than that in one group grave, but you never know. These people, when they died, there was no way using the technology that they had back at the time of the war that they could identify the remains. There were just too many remains all in the same area. So they put them in a common grave. So in this case, these 5 individuals from this segregated infantry regiment were all in the same location. And the database we got from Arlington had the name of Paul Alliston, Howard Cooper, Chandler, and Newton all in the database. But for some reason, John Stroud is not in the Arlington database. So when you are working on a group grave, our directors will assign all of them in the same common grave to you. Look on the gravestone, and if you find that there's one missing, go ahead and just insert an extra line in the database you're given, or add it at the bottom so that we have that information. So John Stroud here wasn't even on the list. That had to be added in. So we're glad that he's not being left out. That one's been added to the list. Okay, so when you're done, and my guess is once you get familiar with how to do this, it can take 5 minutes or less to do each of these names once you know how to look for this and fill those out. So not a big time to take a lot of time. And as you can tell, information is right there in front of you pretty much. So we really appreciate you can help. If you complete it, return to the state director. If you're able to have more time, you can request more names to research. Okay, let's talk a little about state directors in case you're curious. So, did I say state directors? I meant sector directors. Section directors. Typo there. So our section directors, they serve 2 main functions. They build out the databases of the Arlington sections, and they take requests for names to work on, and then they mark them off the lists when they are done. There's 17 sections ranging from a few hundred to up to 2,000. So if you're interested in maybe being a section director, please email me and I'll get you more details. So just to wet your whistle a little bit here. This is a map of Arlington, and here in the numbers that you're seeing listed here is I went through the database they gave us, which is like 13,000 names, and I divided them by the sections that they are in. And these are not going to be all World War II fallen. I have another source that tells me that there should be 7,700, even though the list of names it gave me is 13,000 plus. And I'm thinking it's because hopefully half of them are either died during that period but served in the war before, or they just happen to be infants or children that weren't old enough to be in World War II. So we're dividing these into 70 different sections, and we'll have a state director in charge of each of these sections. The section that we've been working with was actually this East section in orange. All of these, even though there's lots of sections, they don't have a bunch of World War II names in any one of them, so I combined them all into one section of about 100 names total. So that's the East section. We have a North section over here that has a number of sections, but again, not a lot in any one of them. And then we have a South section here in red that I've combined, a middle section here in this peach color that I have, and most of the other sections are one section by themselves pretty much. So section 12 has more World War II names than any other, 2,615. But again, a lot of them are probably not World War II. They just are buried in that section, and they're either infants or they were from a prior service before World War II. So we're giving each of these sections a name. Each of these have operations a name. So the first one's called Watchtower. It's the actual code name that was used for the Guadalcanal. There's like 100 of these we're starting with. And then the next one we're going to do, it's the north section of Arlington. We're calling that Land Crab. There's almost 300 potential names in that section. Land Crab was the code name for the Attu campaign when the Americans went in there and went against the Japanese that had landed there a year earlier. And then we're just kind of going through these from smallest to largest. And we're hoping to have like 2 or 3 or 4, even more people if they want, be section directors. And we had directors help us with D-Day, which was 2,500. That's a lot. And we have had directors for Pearl Harbor, and that's 2,300, and that's a lot too. So we're trying to cut back the time commitment of people who want to be section directors. Obviously, the smaller ones won't take that long, maybe just a few weeks to get these done. And then if, say, you did Watchtower, and we had a couple other people that were doing Land Crab and Torch, then we could loop you back in and you could do Galvanic. So our section directors, we anticipate maybe spend up to 1 or 2 hours a day while they're doing this. So if that's something you're interested in, to take a whole section of Arlington and just be responsible for making sure that everyone in those sections have their stories done, I'd really appreciate the help. Okay, just ending here with someone that was a section director here. This is Admiral Nimitz, General MacArthur, President Roosevelt. He's just showing here we're doing some planning of what we are going to be doing. And that's what our section directors are doing. They're kind of the role of Nimitz or Spruance or Halsey and getting ready for each campaign. That's this video, and I appreciate your interest, and please contact me if you want to learn more. Thank you.